A newlywed farmer and his wife were visited by her mother, who immediately demanded an inspection of the place. While they were walking through the barn, the farmer's mule suddenly reared up and kicked the mother-in-law, unfortunately killing her instantly. At the funeral service, the farmer stood near the casket and greeted people as they walked by. The pastor noticed that whenever a woman would whisper something to the farmer, he would nod his head, yes, and say something. Whenever a man walked by and whispered to the farmer, he would shake his head, no, and mumble a reply. Curious, the pastor later asked the farmer what that was all about. The farmer replied, "The women would say, 'What a terrible tragedy,' and I would nod my head and say, 'Yes, it was.' The men would ask, 'You want to sell that mule?' And I would shake my head and say, 'Can't. It's all booked up for a year.'" But 2. A mother-in-law doesn't trust her sons-in-law, so she decides to test them. First, she goes to the oldest house. She jumps into a well, but her son-in-law rescues her promptly. The next morning, the oldest son-in-law finds a brand new Suzuki in front of his house with a little note. "Lots of love, your mother-in-law." The next day, she goes to her second son-in-law's house. She jumps into a well once again. Her son-in-law rescues her, but only after pondering about the decision for a while. The next morning, the second son-in-law finds a second-hand Trabant in front of his house with a little note. "Love, your mother-in-law." Finally, the next day, she goes to see her third son-in-law. She jumps into a well, but the youngest son-in-law doesn't rescue her, so she drowns and dies. The next morning, the youngest son-in-law finds a splendid new Porsche in front of his house with a little note. "Thank you, your loving father-in-law." 3. A man went to the hospital to visit his mother-in-law, who was in serious condition. On the way back, the wife, very worried, asks, "So, honey, how's my mom doing?" He replies, "She looks great. She is in good health. She will still live for many years. Next week she will be released from the hospital and will come and live with us forever." "Wow, that's amazing," says the wife. "But this is very strange, dear. Yesterday she seemed to be on her deathbed. The doctor said she should have a few days to live." "Well, I don't know how she was yesterday," he replied. "But today when I arrived at the hospital, the doctor told me that we should prepare for the worst." 4. A man finds a genie lamp, rubs it, and poof, a genie appears. "Genie, I have the power to grant you 3 wishes, but keep in mind, whatever you wish, your mother-in-law will receive 2-fold. Man, okay. My first wish is for $1 billion. Genie, your wish is granted, but keep in mind that your mother-in-law will receive $2 billion. Man, that's fine. My second wish is for a 20,000 square feet mansion in the Hamptons. Genie, your wish is granted, but keep in mind that your mother-in-law will receive a 40,000 square feet mansion in the Hamptons. Man, that's fine. Genie, okay, what is your third wish? Man, I want you to beat me half to death. 5. So Barry is visiting his in-laws after a night spent drinking heavily. In his hungover state, he is desperate to do a fart and tries to edge one out carefully, but loses control and it makes a loud trumpeting sound. And the host yells at their dog, "Get out of its spot! Get out from under there!" And Barry thinks this is great. They are blaming the dog under his chair. So next time Barry needs some relief, he lets drive with another fart. And the host yells at their dog again, "Get out of its spot! Get out from there!" So Barry is very grateful for the opportunities for relief, and when the urge takes him, lets another fart go. And the host now yells, "For Christ's sake, Spot, get out from under there before the bass on you." 6. A 55-year-old lady suddenly started learning to swim instead of her usual routine of going to a temple. Everyone was curious and asked her, "Why the change in your interest in swimming nowadays?" The lady, with a look of helplessness, replied, "Whenever my son and daughter-in-law quarrel with each other, my daughter-in-law always asks my son, 'If your mom and I fall into water, whom will you save first?' And because I do not want to put my son in a difficult position, I am learning to swim." A few days later, husband and wife were quarreling again, and the daughter-in-law unreasonably asked, "Now tell me, if your mom and I fall into the water, who will you save first?" Husband replied, "I don't have to get into the water. My mom knows to swim. She will save you." Wife refused to relent. "No, you have to jump into the water and have to save one of us." "Whom will you save?" Husband replied, "Then you will surely die, because I don't know how to swim. And my mom will definitely save me first." 7. On a crowded train, traveling somewhere in Europe, a US Marine walked the entire length of the train looking for a seat before realizing that the only seat available was currently occupied by a well-dressed, middle-aged French woman's poodle. The weary Marine asked, "Ma'am, may I have that seat?" The French woman just sniffed and said to no one in particular, "Americans are so rude. My little Fifi is using that seat." The Marine walked the entire length of the train again and discovered that the only seat available was in fact the one currently being occupied by the poodle. Trudging tiredly back, the Marine arrived once more before the Frenchwoman and said, "Please, ma'am, may I sit down? I'm very tired." She snorted, "Not only are you Americans rude, you are also arrogant. Why should I care if you are tired?" This time, the Marine didn't say a word, but simply picked up the little dog, tossed it out the train window, then sat down. The woman shrieked, "Someone defend my honor! This American needs to be put in his place." An English gentleman sitting nearby spoke up, "Sir, you Americans seem to have a penchant for doing the wrong thing. You hold your fork in the wrong hand, and you drive your cars on the wrong side of the road. And now, sir, you seem to have thrown the wrong out the window.